right, so for those who are here for our Advocating in the School System session, so we have Holly Martinez here. She joins us from Disability Rights Texas. So she lives right here in the area, and she's got extensive background in advocating, obviously, for disability rights in school systems. So, Holly.
Thank you. Okay, we'll start there. So just a little bit about, or not. There we go. So a little bit about Disability Rights Texas, which is the organization that I'm in. We are a nonprofit law firm, and we represent, families, adults, and children in the school system, among other areas. My focus is education, but we have many different areas that we support people with disabilities in. Some of the services that we offer include, of course, representing a lot of juvenile justice situations. We also provide a lot of work in voting and ensuring that people with disabilities have access to voting. And we did a lot of work with the guardianship and educating families on the different areas of guardianship when it comes to getting prepared, especially in the school system. We find that a lot of parents, their child turns 18 and it's like, uh-oh, what do we do now? So working through that process as well. Some of the areas of focus here, like I said, alternatives to guardianship, community integration, transportation, especially down here, disaster preparedness and recovery. We do a lot with different areas in the Houston kind of greater metroplex on ensuring that services are intact, transportation, where are these kids going to go, especially children in maybe day hab programs. So working with families on that. We do a lot with early childhood. That's kind of in my realm as far as making sure that they're getting services through the school district and getting identified. We also do a lot with healthcare and housing with families as well. And at the end here, I have our kind of nationwide website address that you guys can go to and find your specific state access center there. We are the federally recognized protection agency, and so there's one in every state. So we're granted some different authority depending on the situation as far as monitoring. We go into different residential centers and kind of out-of-district day hab programs for education and monitor and make sure that they're following the rules, so to speak. So that's one of my duties as well. Okay, so we will start to kind of go into the education realm here and kind of start where it all starts, IDEA, right? The idea of keeping everybody having access to what they need. So IDEA is the Individuals with Disabilities Act. It's been around a long time, but most of what is applied in today's world really was reauthorized in 2004, and that's when children were provided that access to FAPE. I'm sorry, I'm a little nervous. I don't do well with microphones. I'm usually in front of a bunch of teachers, so bear with me. So FAPE, and accessing their right to FAPE. So a lot of times if I've called in as an advocate, my role is to ensure that the child has access to FAPE, and the reason they called me is because they were denied access to FAPE. And that can look like not having a child in their least restrictive environment, right? Not having them in that gen ed setting. In 2015, it was reauthorized again, and that was kind of amended through the ESSA Act, or the Every Student Succeeds Act. So they've been kind of starting to bring a little bit more into that. So IDEA is broken up into 4 parts. Part A is that overarching umbrella that ensures access to FAPE. Part B is educational procedures of children and youth 3 to 21. Part C is that early intervention, so from birth to 3. You want to, that one's very, very important. A lot of families aren't aware that the public school and where they're zoned is responsible for providing an evaluation for your child should you need it. Part D is more of the training and implementation, different grants, different ways that the schools can look to training and different access to different kinds of monies that they can use for that. So Part B is what we're going to focus on today. Okay, the objectives. So IDEA, like we said, is there to grant access to FAPE, right? So we want to find and identify those kiddos, involve parents or guardians. The evaluation we're going to talk about in depth, because that's, in my opinion, the most important fundamental component of an IEP is that evaluation. Develop the IEP. Related services, which that can look like OT, occupational therapy, physical therapy, music therapy, equestrian therapy. There's a lot of different related services out there. Some you got to fight a little harder for, but they're out there. LRE, or the least restrictive environment, the records of the student, and the process for resolving complaints. Because you can complain, I promise. Okay, so IDEA, under federal law, IDEA gives us the what, right? It gives us what should the process look like, what needs to be in there. The states tell us how. So as you can imagine, every state is different. When we get families from California that come in to Texas and they're like, well, I had this, and this, and I'm like, I'm sorry, we got to work through that. We have to go about it in a different way. So some states do a lot more than what IDEA, the provisions are, and then some states do just enough, but they can't do less. So what is special education? We talk about it, we say my kid needs to go to special education, but what does that mean? What is the expectation there? So it's instruction that is specially designed, and there's no cost to you. So there's no cost for speech therapy. There's no cost for occupational therapy. And it needs to meet the unique needs of the child with a disability. I should have underlined that too. Unique needs. Not everybody's IEP should look the same. Not everybody should get speech for 20 minutes every 3 weeks. It really needs to be individualized. Instruction can be conducted in a classroom, in a hospital, in a residential facility, in the home. Wherever that child needs that instruction is where it's going to be provided. And that specially designed instruction is using accommodations, modifications, adapting the environment to meet the unique needs of your child. So it's designed to meet their needs, and that's all laid out in the IEP. This is one of my favorite kind of reminders to school districts when I'm working with them. Special education is not a place. It is an absolute set of services, and can be provided in different settings. Special education, all children are general education students first, and special ed is there with that specially designed instruction to support them in the gen ed setting. Now, some students, the gen ed setting might not be the most appropriate environment to gain access to their education. So special education is there to design a different type of setting for them there. But it's not a place. It is a service. So the principles of IDEA, this is really kind of the nuts and bolts of what we're going to talk about today. FAPE, which we already touched on. Appropriate and timely evaluations, the individualized education plan, least restrictive environment, your participation, parent participation, prior written notice, which is not talked about a lot, but is exceptionally important, and then the procedural safeguards, also very important. Okay, so FAPE, we're looking at the legal expectation for children with disabilities. It requires the schools to provide that special education and related services to meet those unique needs. So it's required, it's not an option. Evaluations. So how many have started the school process? How many of you are just so excited and thrilled with what you've received from the school? Nobody? Kind of, somewhat, sort of? So they're keeping you just on a leash? They're keeping you just happy enough? Okay. Evaluations are absolutely key. Please read them. I know they're like 80 pages. Please read them. If you don't understand something, ask them. The evaluation team absolutely should be meeting with you before it's presented in an IEP meeting. So you can go through and ask all those questions. It's not a skim through, oh, this is the eligibility. No, you need to really understand what that is, because that evaluation is the base for all of the services that you're gonna want for your child, and that they're eligible for and that they deserve. So the evaluation needs to answer two basic questions. Does the child have a disability? And do they need special education and related services? So keep in mind, for an initial, that means the first evaluation that a child ever gets, that 15, 45, 30 rule. You ask for an evaluation, the district has 15 days to obtain consent. So it doesn't matter if they have to meet as a group to discuss and they have to do all these things, they need to obtain that consent within 15 days, period. After that, they have 45 days to complete the evaluation. That's it, 45 days to get in there, do their observations, write the report. Gets a little tricky at the end of the year, and if you get it at the end of the year, if there's less than 35 days, then it will be done at the beginning, it will be completed by the beginning of the following year. After that report is done, you have 30 days to go to an IEP meeting. And that's where you set services and the goals, okay? It's hard to find that anywhere online, by the way. Okay, so the evaluation needs to be absolutely comprehensive. So it's not, oh, we didn't get to the OT, we'll come back to that. No, it needs to be very comprehensive. Everything needs to be covered. Gathering data from multiple sources, so from the classroom, from parents, from the lunchroom, multiple settings, and make sure that you're involved in that. You're absolutely an important component in the information that they need to make a successful evaluation and really be able to give that comprehensive kind of look at your child. Be completed by a team of trained and knowledgeable professionals. That should be underlined as well. So we're not having a diag or diagnostician complete the psychological component of an FIE. That's done by an LSSP. So ensuring that the rightly certified personnel is completing the sections of the evaluation is also important. Another big component is that it needs to be administered in the student's native language. So down here, several students that I've worked with, Spanish speakers. That's their native language. So the presentation of that evaluation needs to be in Spanish. Of course they're not going to respond to you. They don't know what you're saying. That doesn't mean that's an appropriate evaluation. So really looking at that. And then when it's presented to the family, it needs to be presented in the native language so they fully understand what's happening, okay? So when we're looking at the educational needs, so there's a component in the evaluation that is the achievement and cognitive kind of section of that eval. That performance is compared with other students in the school who are the same age, same grade. designed to measure areas like reading, math, and spelling. So that's where you'll see where they're at. If it's not clear, we can speak up and say, this is not clear, please redo it, please obtain additional data, whatever needs to happen to show where your child is in comparison to the other students of the same age and same grade. And the testing procedures may need to be modified. That is okay. That should happen. If a student is nonverbal, we need to have an alternative way for them to respond, period. Because they don't respond is not measuring their cognition. That's a performance issue, right? So we have to make sure that those are modified to meet the kiddos' needs. Again, offer to help in any way. And don't forget about assistive technology. Very, very important. An AT is more than just a voice output device. It's more than an iPad. Assistive technology is extremely large and encompassing, and it's any technology that's going to assist that child in their ability to communicate and access that social interaction and access the curriculum. For example, I had a student a couple of weeks ago. The district was trying to be a little challenging with an AT supplement for a high school student. It was mainstream, needed some in-class support, some social skills, but he had a really hard time in doing certain things in math, and so we needed the calculator. Well, in order to have a calculator for the SAT and ACT, you have to have an assistive technology supplement stating you need that. And so we had to get that so he could have it for the SAT. So that may not speak to everybody's needs, but it's just an example of how that AT supplement is more than just an iPad. It really is technology that can help facilitate learning. Okay, so related services. The evaluation absolutely has to consider those additional and related services, whatever that looks like. It should be a part of that FI, and here's some kind of examples. Common, but certainly does not encompass the whole umbrella of related services: OT, speech, PT. Some other considerations: orientation and mobility. That's an evaluation that needs to be done, and it needs to be unfortunately and typically requested by the family. They're not just going to volunteer that, even if they can see it needs to be done. An FBA, functional behavior assessment. Again, if there's not overt behavior, a lot of times they're not going to do that. But behavior is more than physical aggression. That's my background, is behavior. That's why I knew Dr. Catlett, who was up here earlier, for a long time. It's not just throwing chairs or going to physical aggression. Behavior is noncompliance. Behavior is the inability to maintain focus directly in front. Behavior is a lot of things, so it doesn't matter what that behavior looks like. If that behavior is interfering, right, they need to do an FBA, okay? And then again, the AT. So the evaluation for related services should include specific recommendations, specific times, the frequency, duration, who's going to be doing it. So if a student has speech and it's recommended for speech therapy, but the provider is teacher, no. A speech pathologist needs to be providing those services. And all of those recommendations, they may be in the evaluation, but then when you go to the IEP meeting, it's not in the IEP. So you have to really make sure and double check that. And if you don't agree to it, that's okay. You don't agree to it. But you need to make sure who is providing that. A lot of times, districts will sneak in consults, right? And so it'll look like you have all these services, but they're consult only, which means they're having no direct access to your child. they're meeting with the teacher for 15 minutes every 9 weeks. That's not acceptable. That should be an addition. So they should be meeting with the teacher. And if we need to put that in the schedule of services, we absolutely will. But that should be a given. So you really need to look on who's providing those services, and is it direct or indirect or consult. And again, it's the IEP committee. In Texas, we say ARD, and I forgot when I created this, I had ARD everywhere, and they were like, no, you need to. We just passed a bill, though, that they're gonna change that. I guess that was the most pressing matter here in Texas for special education, was to change ARD to IEP. So I'll leave my political thoughts to the side on that, but just sharing. Okay, so your participation. You should be participating in every component and that's in the IEP, from the evaluation to the meeting, providing input, providing any kind of data that is going to help provide, again, that comprehensive look at your child. So you can talk about services that they're getting outside of school. No, that doesn't replace services that they need in school. It's additional information. Modifications that you see at home that have been provided a positive impact, you can, talk to the school about that. Review all the evaluations and bring in those medical notes and recommendations from your healthcare providers if it's going to be beneficial, and again, make a positive impact in the school setting. So the final report, again, probably a good 60 to 80 pages, but it should absolutely have the present levels, what they're presently shown to do. What are the present levels of academic and functional performance? Any concerns or problems with certain school subjects, different skills, if they're at the prerequisite learning level, that needs to be stated, and it should be in there. Again, that comparison and the reasons or the motivation for the problems that they're having in school, including cognitive and behavior. So once the district, I know we kind of touched on this, once the district completes the evaluation, you must get a copy before the IEP meeting. It is completely unacceptable to provide an evaluation at the beginning of an IEP meeting, period. If that happens, you can cancel the meeting. And no, that's not a disagreement. You absolutely can cancel the meeting, because that is an unacceptable approach to providing you the information. You have a right to inspect, review the results of all of the evaluations, and you should. And again, you should be able to meet with that evaluation and assessment team before the IEP meeting. And a lot of times they want to, so they can go over it with you so you don't end up in a 5 or 6 hour ARD, or IEP meeting, I'm sorry. Okay, your parents' rights here. So you're provided that prior written notice, provided notice to evaluate. So you'll get consent. They're going to provide that notice saying exactly what is going to be on the evaluation. So as you go through that checklist, you need to make sure everything's checked. Because if something's not, then they will not evaluate because they don't have consent to do so. Okay? Provided information about what will be evaluated, how your child will be evaluated, what methods. You can ask them, what are the assessment tools you're going to use? They should give you all of the assessments that they're going to use. And they should provide you with the safeguards at that time. And every state has the procedural safeguards, maybe called something a little bit different in each state, but they're procedural safeguards that you should get so you can see what are your rights should you be in disagreement with the evaluation. Because you can disagree with the evaluation. So disagreements and requesting an independent education evaluation. Raise of hands, who's ever heard of an IEE or requested an IEE, which is an independent evaluation? Got one lone duck in here. Okay. So if you think that the evaluation is not complete does not accurately describe your child, you may request an IEE, which is an independent evaluation completed at the school's expense, outside of the school. Typically, they'll have a list of providers, and you will go to those providers and get an outside evaluation. So when you're looking to get an IEE, first and foremost, the school has the right to complete an evaluation first. So you can't request an IEE before the school has provided an evaluation. You need to notify in writing. Don't just tell the teacher as you're coming in on parent-teacher conference night. Say, hey, you know, we're having a problem with the evaluation. We want to get an IEE. It needs to be in writing, preferably an email, so it's you're having a little electronic paper trail there. And that you expect the school to cover the cost. That is your expectation. You should not have to pay for the IEE. Sometimes the schools will have parents pay and then they'll reimburse them. I highly advise you not to do that, because that is a long journey to get a check, just to be transparent. You can put in there how paying for the evaluation is, one, not in your child's best interest, and two, you don't have the funds to do that. Put it in writing, and then they have to pay for that. It's their responsibility. And they should be completed by a person outside of the district. Like I said, they'll have a list typically of providers that have completed IEs before or have gone through the verification process and are already verified by the district. But if you have an outside provider that's not on that list, you can get their information, submit it to the school district. They'll go through the verification process to make sure that they're qualified to provide that evaluation. And in Texas, the schools have a school year to have the IEE completed. It may be different in each state. Reevaluations. This is probably the most tumultuous area of evaluations, because it's really a gray area. You don't have the nice little 15, 30, 45 rule to follow. The statement for the timeline for reevaluations is in a timely manner. So for a school district, that can mean a number of things, right? I have a case right now where speech was requested in January and they just got consent. That's not a timely manner. Waiting 5 months for consent is not okay. But you know, they don't have those guidelines, and so you kind of have to stay on them sometimes in order for them to follow through. So you can check you guys might live in a state that provides a reevaluation timeline. In Texas, we don't, but that's something that I would definitely look at. All the current educational and related services are up for grabs in the reeval. A lot of times, they'll go and just do a read and just review previous evaluation data, say, yeah, nothing's really changed too much, or just a few little things, and kind of condense it into a summary, but they're not really doing any new evaluations. They're just reviewing the previous evaluation, taking some data from the current teacher, maybe doing an observation. But if you have a concern and want another evaluation completed, a new assessment, you can request that to be done during the reeval. Schools are only required in Texas to provide one evaluation a year. Okay. Some states, I think Pennsylvania, they do a reeval every 2 years, I want to say. So they go above and beyond the expectation of IDEA. Okay, so the read process. So you agree, the school determines no additional testing is needed. If you're in agreement with that, then you would update the IEP, or the evaluation team would update the IEP. You would then have a read. But again, in Texas, in 3 years, that's the next time there's going to be a full evaluation. So you also want to think about where your child is kind of in that continuum of school. So if I have a 5-year-old that just got an initial, now they're 8, it's a read, I can see that. We can look at that and see, has anything really changed? And then 3 years later, they do another read. And then 3 years later, they do another read. So then we're looking at going into middle school, and they're basing all that information on a phi from when he was 5. That's where there's a problem. And so that's where you really have to look at those reevaluations and see when was the last full evaluation done, and pay attention to those dates. Okay, so the IEP. Sorry. This is developed to really detail the special education and related services that are provided to your child who receives special education. It must be revised at least every year, at least. You can make adjustments to the IEP at any time and call for an IEP meeting anytime during the year, but at least annually, those need to be updated. I highly advise if you have an initial, a lot of times when kids first get into school, their initials are September-ish, right? They get into school, they get the evaluation, they have their IEP meeting in September, and then the following year it's September, and then the following year it's September. I highly advise adjusting that to where that annual hits right around February, because you have really good data both from having breaks from Thanksgiving and Christmas, but you're not cramming everything in at the beginning of the year to where data can sometimes be skewed coming off of summer. But right in the middle is typically a really nice time to have an annual ARD. You can talk about extended school year services at that time, even if the district says, no, we're gonna come back in May. No, we're gonna talk about it right now, and you can call me and let me know what school my kid's gonna go to this summer. It's a really good time. So if you have that, if you can bump it up, that's advisable. Same thing for if you have an IEP meeting in May. You can bump that up because May is never a good time. So, I'll get off my soapbox there. It really needs to talk about how the child's going to be educated. What accommodations are going to be put in place? How is the instruction going to be delivered? What does it look like for them? Again, if you don't understand it, ask. You should have a clear understanding and idea of how the instruction is going to be presented and they're scheduled throughout the day. It needs to make sure that there's measurable goals. So Sally will learn her ABCs by the end of the year. No, that's not acceptable. It's not measurable, okay? Needs to be individualized, needs to really reflect the needs that your child has, and you have to be included in that development. You're absolutely a part of the process and should be a part of the process. And this includes in goal writing. If you get in the IEP meeting and see, hey, they're missing this, they need to add it, okay? So the implementation. This is where a lot of calls come to me. I need help. Please come to my IEP meeting. Please help me with my child's IEP. The school's not implementing, right? They're not doing it. Yes, it's there, it's written down, but they're not doing it. So therefore, they're denying them access to FAPE, right? That'll really raise the eyebrows if you go to school and say, you're denying access to FAPE. They're gonna be like, huh? They're gonna call their attorneys, they're gonna see what's going on, they're gonna have a big staffing, because it's a big deal. It's a problem, and they can get in pretty big trouble for that. So when we're talking about implementation, really understanding what that looks like, I put at the end a link, and it's the IDEA manual that my organization and another organization puts together. And it's just condensing all of that information into a nice little manual. A lot of it is Texas, some of the specific rules, but the overarching concepts are applicable across the states. So I'll have that slide up for a while, and you guys can get that information. So when we're talking about the, looking at the teachers and what they need to do to be adequately prepared for that IEP meeting, during the meeting, talk about training. Talk about the training that the teachers go through, especially if you have, VI situations, if you have mobility situations. How are those teachers getting information and how to implement the services in the IEP? If Braille is one of the accommodations, but the teacher doesn't know anything about Braille, how are they going to implement that? What does that look like? Do we need to have more related services? We need to put some training in the schedule page. All of those things matter, because if it's not in the IEP, they will not do it. And I'm not being ugly towards school districts, but they're not going to do it. They're not going to say, you know what, Sally needs some VI training. Let me go over there and see how she's doing. It just doesn't happen that way. So it needs to really be in that IEP. We talked about this with the related services, who's going to do it? Who's going to implement that? When you're looking at those accommodations, what does that look like in the classroom? What does that look like in the lunchroom? What does that look like at recess? All of those things matter, and they need to be able to speak to that and make sure it's in the deliberations. Discuss those special circumstances or specific knowledge you have about your child. Is there a different kind of accommodation that needs to be put in place for pickup and drop off? Maybe Sally gets overwhelmed, right, at dismissal because it's a crazy town, and she needs to be picked up at a different pickup spot. That is absolutely acceptable. Put it in the IEP, right? All of those things matter, but again, it needs to go in the IEP so everybody is on the same page, but that we can also hold them accountable for lack of implementation, because then they're denying them what? Faith. Good. Okay, so we have the IEP, you're looking at a draft, and then you get the PLAF, right? So the PLAF should also be in the evaluation. Remember those present levels. It should be in every IEP. So it's present levels of academic and functional performance. So how are they doing in their classes, and how are they doing on their functional skills? Functional self-help, and that's toileting, hand washing, how are they transitioning, behavior, all of those things. So you're going to review those evaluations. It should be a summary of progress for strengths and needs all across the different areas. And it really needs to have strengths and struggles. That's what I always find that, and it's kind of unfortunately consistent with some of my behavior cases. It just shows the struggles in the PLAF. That's all it has, is the struggles. Like, I need something. You got to give me something of strength here. I need something. So it should be, and a good, strength struggles for math, strength struggles for reading. Every component in that PLAF should have both. They should be able to talk about the strengths and the struggles. Again, teacher and parent input, I see more times than not that there's not a parent input section in the PLAF. You guys have a voice. You need to participate. If they haven't reached out to you, reach out to them and say, I need to provide some input for the PLAF. Please give me a survey. Please give me a PLAF interview. All of those schools across the states have them, either from an LSSP or a DIAG. There's access to parent forms that you can fill out to really participate in the PLAF. So when you're talking about participating in wanting your voice heard in the PLAF, what is it you're supposed to say? What kind of participation is really going to, provide a positive impact for your child? So share your ideas about the progress. You've been getting the progress reports, hopefully, and you can see sometimes teachers will inflate the data, right? And they may say, oh, she can do this, this, and this, and you're like, I'm not seeing that at home. because that's data too. Maybe then we need to look at some in-home training. Maybe then we need to look at some other kind of related service to help that child generalize those skills into the home setting. So provide the same thing, strengths and struggles, what you're seeing. Talk about what you can do outside of school, because sometimes you'll get the opposite. Students aren't performing in the classroom the way they're performing in the home setting. So being able to provide that is also data, okay? Share those reports from the outside therapists, different consultants, doctors, any kind of therapy or service that they're getting is going to provide a good impact. And really look at, has your child made progress? We get through all these things, and at the end of the day, well, my child really hasn't made progress. Okay, that's a problem, because if they're not making progress, that's a denial of faith, because then they haven't been exposed to an appropriate education, right? If they're not making any progress. So really looking at that is important, looking at those progress reports, because sometimes I've seen kids have the same writing goal for like 5 years. Johnny will trace uppercase letters. Okay, Johnny's going into 6th grade. It's not appropriate anymore, right? And if he's had the same IEP goal every single year, but in 1st grade it was 50% mastery, and in 5th grade it's 75%. We're moving on. We need to incorporate that into something else. So you really need to look at those progress reports. Could an area in the IEP, do they need additional data? Do we need an additional evaluation? If the student hasn't had OT, but we're really struggling in writing, do we need to request that? Do we need an occupational therapist to come out and say, hey, we're having a hard time with pencil grip, we're having a hard time with our fine motor, come out and see, or we need some sensory input. You know, you can make those requests in the IEP meeting as well. And always, always, always request a copy of the PLAF before the IEP meeting, because the PLAF should not be a paragraph. I'm going to repeat that. The PLAF should not be a paragraph. The PLAF should be an in-depth look at where your child is at. If it's a paragraph, send it back. Say, this is not okay. It's not providing me a picture of my child. And ask questions, even if the teacher rolls her eyes. Maybe I had a bad IEP meeting this morning. I'm a little feisty, okay? Not bad for me, bad for the school, but it's just like, come on, you know? It can get frustrating though, you know? Oh my gosh, I'm already out of time? Oh no. Oh no. Oh, that's okay. Oh, I wanted to get to the goals. I'm so sorry, y'all. I just did not, dang it. I can be in a little corner over here if you guys want, if you want me to hang out, I'm more than happy to hang out, and let me know. I don't want to keep them from anything. I can hang out till they're done doing whatever's next on the schedule. Like, I'm fine. Whatever works for you guys. I'm here for you. For our like organization, but not for this particular presentation. Yeah, you guys go. I will be here if that's okay. Yeah, I'm here for y'all. So do what you need to do, and then I can finish. I'm so sorry. Yeah, I'm gonna catch up on some emails, but I'll be here when y'all come back. Sorry, I don't mind. No. Yeah. ABA, the question of the year, right? No, not in Texas. No. they could, and you could fight it. No, no. I mean, it really depends on, why am I on the microphone?